Hello friends, so this is the PowerApps interview question and here I have bring the 25 interview question. So that will definitely help you for the interview purpose. This is the question 1. You have a SharePoint list with implied details. How would you create a PowerApps to display and edit this information? So you need to do two tasks here. You need to display the data and second one is the editing that data, whatever the data is there in the implied details. So for this, you need to firstly create a Canvas app, okay, and connect that Canvas app with the SharePoint list as a data source, and after that you need to drag and drop the gallery and form you can utilize for displaying the data, and there is also you can implement the edit features of the implied detail list. Question 2 is explain how delegation works in Power Apps and provide an example. So this is a very important question because delegation things is mostly interviewer wants to know from the whoever is applying for the job. Okay. So here you need to just explain delegation is when Power Apps pushes processing to the data source to improve performance. So this is basically used for the improving the performance of the Power Apps tool. Okay. So for this instance, if we are using the SharePoint, only a subset of record is fetched initially and additional records are fetched as needed. So whenever the Power Apps flow will be loaded, so firstly there will be a small record will be fetched there, and after that whenever there will be scroll happen, then that a record will get increased there. Question 3, describe a scenario where you would use a PowerApps custom connector. Means where when we can use the PowerApps custom connector. So the answer should be a custom connector is a useful when integrating with external API that doesn't have a built-in connection in PowerApps. For instance, connecting to a proprietary CRM system. Question 4 is how can we implement security in Power Apps to restrict access to certain users? So here they want to know about the security things in the Power Apps. So using Power Apps permission, you can control access by assigning roles and permissions to the user. So firstly, the role should be defined, and on the base of that, the user should be given the permission to that. And how this can be achieved? This can be achieved by using the Power Apps Admin Center. Question 5. Explain how would you handle errors in Power Apps applications. So error handling should be there in all application perspective, and this is a good feature for that. So in the Power Apps perspective, we need to use the error handling functions such as error or on error to capture and handle the errors gracefully. So here also we need to log the errors. So logging errors to a data source for analysis is a very good practice. This is a question 6 and this is a very important question, and we can also say, I mean, this is a good question for the Power Apps perspective. So what is the question? Can you provide an example of using Power Apps to send data to an external system, such as sending form data to a custom API? So here we need to send the form data to the custom API. So yeah, we can do it, and how we can achieve it by using the patch function. Patch function can be utilized to send the data to the external system. But here we should ensure that API endpoint and authentication details are properly configured at the API level. Next question is how would you implement conditional formatting in Power Apps? So conditional formatting can be implemented using the if function in the property setting of controls, or by using the color function to dynamically set colors based on the conditions. So here there are two way to handle it. First one is the using the if function, and second one is the using the color function. So this you can utilize on the base of the condition there. Question 8 is describe a scenario where you would use a PowerApps portal. So PowerApps portal are used when you need to build external facing websites that allow external users, means non-licensed users, to interact with the data stored in the common data service. Question 9 is very important question. Explain the difference between Canvas app and model driven apps in the Power Apps. So these are the two types of apps that we can develop in the Power Apps. So Canvas apps are highly customizable and suitable for creating apps from scratch, while model-driven apps are based on a data model and provide a guidance experience with a predefined UI based on the data. So UI you can handle easily in the Canvas app, but in the model driven app it's basically handled on the base of the data model. So here the UI is predefined. We cannot do more changes there on the UI perspective. So this is the practical question, question number 10. How can you implement cascading drop down in Power Apps? There is a requirement in your project of the Power Apps where you need to implement the cascading drop down, right? So here I would use the filter function to dynamically update the choices in the second drop down based on the selection made in the first round. So what is a cascading drop down? Cascading drop down is nothing but a whenever you will change the value in one drop down, on the base of that the second drop down value should be filled with the data items. So this is the cascading drop down. This is also a practical question, question number 11. There is a scenario where you have to create a multi-screen Power Apps. How would you pass data between screens? Means here you need to pass the data from one screen to another screen. So there are multiple way means in which data can be passed between the screens. So here data can be passed between screens using context variables, global variables, or by using the navigate function with parameters. Question number 2 is explain the use of PowerApps patch function. So the patch function is used to modify records in a data source. It is commonly used to update or create record in a data source. Question number 13 is how would you implement offline capability in Power Apps application? So interviewer want to know suppose there is no internet availability, so how you will utilize the offline capability there. So Power Apps has a built-in feature called offline mode. I would enable this feature allowing users to work with the app even when they are not connected to the internet. So it's clear that in the Power Apps we can also work when we don't have internet connection, and whenever the internet connection will be restored, then this app will be automatically updated there. Question number 14 is for the AI builder. So here this question is describe a scenario where you would use Power Apps AI builder. So AI builder can be used in scenarios like extracting information from images, predicting outcomes, or classifying data. For example, using AI builder to recognize product details from the images. So from the images or from the scanned copy of the document, by using the AI builders, we can fetch the data and we can store that data in the SharePoint list or any other data source. Question 15 is how can we integrate Power Apps with Microsoft Flow? So Power Apps and Flow can be integrated by triggering flows from Power Apps using the Power Automate control or by using the flow function in Power Apps. So there are two ways. One way is the Power Automate control, and another way is using the flow function in Power Apps. Question 16 is explain how to implement a timer control in Power Apps. The timer control can be used to implement timed events. That events that we want means at particular time or after some interval that event should triggered. So for example, to create a countdown timer or to trigger actions from after a specific period, we need to use the timer control. Question number 17 is related to the authentication in the Power Apps. How would you implement user authentication in Power Apps? So user authentication can be implemented using Azure Active Directory, AAD, or other supported identity providers. User can be required to log in before accessing the Power Apps. Question 18 is describe a scenario where you would use PowerApps component. So Power Apps components are useful for creating reusable controls across multiple screen or apps. So Power App component is nothing but a reusable control that we can use on the multiple screen or we can use all the multiple apps. So for instance, creating a custom navigation bar that is consistent across different scenarios. So if you remember, okay, in the different sites you will be able to see their header and footers are fixed and also navigation controls are also fixed. So in that case you can create the component for that header, footer or the navigation or any other whatever as per the requirement. Question 19 is performance related question. How can you optimize the performance of a Power Apps app? So performance optimization can include minimizing the use of complex formula. So we need to minimize the use of complex formula. We need to delegate the queries to a data source, and we also need to use the appropriate controls for the different scenario. So we need to define when we need to use the gallery, when we need to use the table. So by handling the formula, delegation queries and different controls, we can increase the performance of any Power Apps app. Question 20. Explain how to use the collect function in Power Apps. So the collect function is used to create a collection of data in Power Apps. For example, collecting user input from a form and storing it in a collection for further processing. So whatever user is entering in the form, we can store that data in the collect function and we can further utilize that data. Question 21. In a scenario where you need to update the data in SQL Server database from Power Apps, how would you accomplish this? So here you need to use the patch function for updating or adding the record in the SQL Server database. But there is a prerequisite means the connection with the SQL Server should be already established. Next question is describe a scenario where you would use the filter function in Power Apps. So filter function is used to display subset of data based on a specific criteria. Suppose there is a requirement for displaying the only active users or filtering the product based on a particular category. So in that case, you need to use the filter function. Question 13. How can you implement a responsive design in Power Apps app? Responsive design can be achieved by using flexible layouts, controls, and containers. I would use controls like columns and flexible heights to adapt the app to different screen sizes. There is a question. Explain the concept of Power Apps formula and provide an example. Why we use the Power Apps formula here? So Power Apps formula are expressions used to manipulate and control the data. An example is concatenate function. What concatenate function? Concatenate function basically combine the text from multiple fields into a single screen. So formulas in the Power Apps are very much helpful for creating the app. Question number 25 is describe a scenario where you would use the lookup function in Power Apps. The lookup function is used to retrieve a single record from a data source based on a specific condition. For example, looking up additional details for a selected item in a gallery from another data source. So lookup condition is also similar to a filter criteria. Okay, it retrieves a single record from a data source and whatever condition you are providing on the base of that. Thank you friends for watching this video. So please go through the complete video and put your comments, and you can also mention there in the comments if you are looking more question on that topic there. Thank you.